Hello, this is part 4 in a series of videos on Vedic, Vargas, and vibrational astrology. And in this video, we're going to focus on the saptamsa chart. We're going to look at some ideas that have been handed down from ancient times about the saptamsa chart in Jyotish, also known as Vedic astrology. And we're going to work with these ideas, and we're going to get some strong evidence that they work. And in seeing how they work, it's going to give us more ideas about how the saptamsa chart works and areas of life that the saptamsa chart affects that we did not know about. So we're going to see how Vedic astrology has some ideas that can help us in vibrational astrology. And specifically, it is this. In Vedic astrology, there are different ideas about the saptamsa chart. One of the ideas, not the only idea, is that the saptamsa chart is about children and grandchildren. Whoa, children and grandchildren, it just sounds like something from out of nowhere from the point of view of vibrational astrology, because we don't have that idea. Then what I did and what I'm going to show you in this video is looking at the charts of children and grandchildren and seeing something very interesting about what's going on in the saptamsa chart. So let me take you on this journey, and we're going to see how we can understand what we notice in terms of vibrational astrology theory. So we're going to see an integration here of Vedic astrology with vibrational astrology, and bottom line is that it improves our understanding of the ways in which the saptamsa chart works, and specifically how the saptamsa chart is, in fact, involved with our children and grandchildren. So let's see how this works, and we're going to see that there's some similarities that go on between parents, children, and grandchildren, a kind of astrological heredity. So in the ancient Vedic texts, when they say that the saptamsa chart is your children and grandchildren, my first thought is that it describes them. It's read the saptamsa chart and it will describe your children and grandchildren. But what I found is that there are very strong connections between parents, children, and grandchildren. At least there appear to be in the handful of charts we've looked at so far to get a concept for this. And later we're going, in the near future, hopefully, we're going to do some more detailed analysis of databases to see if we can confirm these ideas. But I want to show you this stage of the research where we look at specific cases to trigger ideas and insights that we can later test more thoroughly and carefully. Okay, so let's look at this. The saptamsa chart is, of course, what we call in modern Western astrology the 7th harmonic chart, or I call it the 7th vibration chart. The only difference in Vedic astrology is typically it's done in the sidereal zodiac, and typically in the West we use the tropical zodiac, although people in the West do use sidereal zodiac and some Vedic astrologers use the tropical zodiac. But that's the general tendency. I'm going to be focusing on aspects, and the aspects are not affected by zodiac signs. So for our purposes, the saptamsa chart and the 7th vibration chart are identical. Now, here's a quote from BPHS, the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, if I remember that properly. The BPHS presents 16 Vargas, and these 16 Vargas that are in BPHS are the main 16 that are emphasized in modern Western astrology. Keep in mind that there are other Vargas besides these 16, but these are the 16 that have become kind of standardized for most astrologers today. And it states that sons and grandsons, okay, well here it's not daughters, they're specifically saying sons and grandsons from saptans, or in other words, the saptamsa chart. This is BPHS chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, making the reference to sons and grandsons as being described by the saptamsa chart. And in modern times, instead of just sons and grandsons, people have expanded it out to include, daughters and granddaughters. So now people are saying that it's children and grandchildren. But this is one of the sources for this idea. Now, children and grandchildren is not the only interpretation of the saptamsa chart. There are other interpretations that have been handed down and that people use in Vedic astrology. And you know that in harmonic astrology and in vibrational astrology, the interpretation of the saptamsa chart is completely different. A lot of people say the saptamsa chart is spiritual. In vibrational astrology, we say it makes you quiet and deep. It brings you into a stillness. And from that deep stillness, many things can emerge. Mystical awareness, while your mind is like chattering and blah, 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 and you're just noticing things and you're all engaged in life, you're entangled into life, you're absorbed into it. When you slow down, it gives you the ability to control, to go deeper with things. So the saptamsa chart, from the point of view of vibrational astrology, gives a very fundamental quality that affects many things in life. So these lower vibrations like 5 and 7, they're very fundamental principles. And these fundamental principles get expressed in many ways. As we go to higher vibrations, they become more specific. They're not so general and fundamental to all of life. Okay. So let's check out this idea in Vedic astrology that the saptamsa chart has something to do with children and grandchildren. And when I looked at this, I noticed things in the synastry, the relationship between the parent and child and the parent and the grandchild. So what I'm noticing is, more specifically, the saptamsa chart seems to get inherited. It gets passed down. What is it in the saptamsa chart that gets passed down? Planetary relationships. So what we're noticing is that if a parent has a particular planetary configuration in the saptamsa chart, a very similar, not identical, but very similar planetary configuration appears to be occurring in the children. Now, we've only looked at a handful of cases. Often we start with a handful of cases because it allows us the flexibility to use our astrological expertise to quickly explore and notice interesting things that might be conspicuous. And in the future, we hope to go through a database to confirm these ideas. But let me show you now, at this stage of the research, what we are noticing. Well, now, I'm going to show you some charts. But before I show them, let me explain what we're going to see. We're going to see planets near the same degrees. So, and by same degrees, we mean within about 5 degrees. And we're going to use the Ptolemaic aspects. So this is an east-west integration. We're looking at conjunctions in the saptamsa chart, oppositions, and trines and squares and sextiles. So about 5 degrees for planets that are conjunct, about 3 degrees for squares, and so on. So let's look at it. Here we see the chart of a father and a grandfather. And we take notice of major planetary configurations. There's a conspicuous one in this chart. Sun is trine Moon. This is in the sidereal zodiac with Lahiri and Amsha. Again, we don't really care about the signs because we're just going to look at planetary relationships. Again, what do we see? Very close trine between Sun and Moon. Extremely close. Moon 2.5 Aries, Sun 2.5 Leo. And again, if you do it in the tropical zodiac, the signs and degrees will be different, but you'll see the same exact orb of, 9 minutes. Extremely close. We also see Venus and Jupiter tightly conjunct. Mars and Pluto are conjunct. And we also see that the Mars-Pluto squares the Venus-Jupiter. In particular, Pluto at 27 degrees is square the Venus and Jupiter. So Mars is conjunct Pluto. It's really not involved with Venus-Jupiter. These are what we call spreading patterns. Venus and Jupiter conjunct and square Pluto. Pluto is also conjunct Mars. Okay. What do I have here? Uranus within 1 degree of Sun and Moon. Yeah, we notice that Uranus over here at 3 degrees Cancer is square the Moon. And the Sun is semi-sextile, 30 degrees from Uranus. So we're seeing Sun, Moon, and Uranus in almost basically the same degree. They're all within about a little more than half a degree of each other. Okay. Now, let's look at the daughter's chart. Notice that the daughter has Sun and Moon, quincunx. There is an aspect between Sun and Moon. It's not as strong. The orb is 55 minutes, almost a degree. A 1 degree orb on a quincunx is fairly large. It's a large orb, still within orb. So the daughter has a weak quincunx. The father has a strong trine between the same planets. So here we're getting the Sun-Moon. Sun-Moon for the father gets, you might say, picked up or inherited by the daughter, although the daughter has it weaker than the father. The daughter has Mars-Pluto in square, trine from Gemini to Libra. So the daughter has Mars-Pluto trine, a very strong half a degree orb. And if we go back to the father's chart, remember the father has Mars and Pluto conjunct with a 2.5 degree orb, which is solid. The father's got a solid Mars-Pluto, and the daughter has a solid Mars-Pluto square. So what we're seeing is that the father and the daughter have the same planets emphasized, but the aspects are different. It appears to be that what's happening is the father has Sun-Moon. The father has Mars-Pluto. The daughter also has Sun-Moon, and she also has Mars-Pluto. The aspect will change in the saptamsa chart, but the connection is there. So the inheritance seems to be the same planetary pairs get repeated, not necessarily with the same strength, not necessarily with the same orb. Also interesting is that the father's Mars-Pluto is part of a large pattern. Remember that? Let's go back. That the father's Mars-Pluto are square the Venus-Jupiter, in particular the Pluto is square Venus-Jupiter. So there's some interaction, especially of Pluto with even other planets. This makes the Mars-Pluto even more important, is the key point here. The father's Mars-Pluto is very important because especially the Pluto is part of a large configuration. And notice the daughter has Mercury-Saturn Mars-Pluto. Her Saturn at 3 Leo is sextile to both Mars and Pluto. And her Mercury's opposition Saturn. She has a Mercury opposition Saturn. This is a kite configuration. And, oh, by the way, I'm using a Vedic style wheel. Those of you who are Western astrologers probably finding that uncomfortable. But it's good to get used to seeing these things and being able to deal with them a little bit so that you can communicate with the whole Vedic world. So this is one of the common Vedic wheel styles, very similar to a wheel style that was used in the Middle Ages. In the Vedic style of this, the ascendant is at the top, and then it goes around to the left. 2, 3. We've got the numbers in here to help you know what the houses are. And this is using a Vedic system of whole sign houses. So the Virgo ascendant here is the first house, with the ascendant at 15 Virgo. But anyway, I'm just pointing out planetary positions. So, and I've put them in colored boxes here, so the wheel style shouldn't bother you too much. Okay, so this is, you might say, an anecdotal case, just a little observation that the father and the daughter have some of the same planetary pairs, but in different aspect. So we're getting this feeling, we're getting this feeling that maybe these ancient Vedic books are correct and they didn't explain it all in detail, but it is the children and grandchildren in the sense that that's what gets inherited, those planetary pairs. Maybe that's a common scenario. I'm going to show you some more evidence that it appears that it is common. Now, this connection between parents and children also works with adopted children and stepchildren, especially when there is some kind of connection between the people. Well, with stepchildren, there always is. I mean, with adopted children, they're adopted. So there's obviously a strong connection. So here we have the step-grandson. This is the son of the father's second wife. So the father got married twice, and the second wife has a grandchild. Okay, so it's a step-grandchild of the father. Even stepchildren, especially if they're in communication and there's a connection, often have these saptamsa connections. It's a kind of heredity, but it's not a heredity of the genes. Obviously, it's different from genetic inheritance. It's a kind of vibrational, we can look at it as vibrational resonance. And later I'm going to talk about why would children and grandchildren and even adopted children and stepchildren have a vibrational resonance with a parent in 7 vibration. Why would that be common as it appears to be? Okay, well, let's first look at more examples before we get into that to see if this really does look compelling. Here is a step-grandson, and the step-grandson has sun and moon trine, just like the step-grandfather, but very weak. It's weak. It's 4.5 degrees, a little more than 4.5 degrees. We allow an orb of a little more than 5 degrees based on vibrational astrology. So it's weak. Both the daughter and the step-grandson have weak sun-moon aspects. Interesting. So it's a vibrational resonance. Let's see what else is going on. Remember that I said that the daughter has Mars-Pluto just like the father? Guess what? The step-grandson also has Mars-Pluto. And it's strong, a very strong trine from 4 degrees Aquarius to 4 degrees Gemini. all three people have a Sun, Moon, and a Mars, Pluto. The aspects tend to be different. The strengths vary, although the Mars, Pluto is solid in all three charts. The Sun, Moon is very strong for the father, weak for the two children. So this is getting very interesting, the consistency we see. And the Mars-Pluto is part of a large planetary configuration for all three people. So this Mars-Pluto appears to be especially important because it's part of a large configuration. And that is very basic, fundamental vibrational astrology theory, is that it takes three planets to make something strong. There are exceptions, such as Sun and Moon. Anything Sun and Moon does is important. But the father has a solid Mars-Pluto, and it's part of a planetary configuration, as we noticed. That's true for the daughter, and it's true for the step-grandson. For the step-grandson, that Mars trine Pluto is involved with Jupiter, whereas it's Jupiter over here at 2 degrees Virgo. So, well, actually, no, well, it's spreading. Jupiter's weakly involved. Jupiter is square the Mars, but for quincunx we allow only 1 degree 20-minute orb with small orb, so the quincunx is out of orb. It's a spreading pattern, but the step-grandson does have a third planet, Jupiter getting involved a little bit, and the Sun is very strongly involved. So he has a solid three-planet combination. I didn't memorize all this, so excuse me for stumbling around a little bit, but what we're noticing is, oh man, the step-grandson has a huge Sun, Mars, Pluto, all at 4.5 degrees, extremely strong. It's Sun opposition Mars making a trine and sextile to, trine and sextile to Pluto. Pluto is sextile Sun and trine Mars. He inherits a strong pattern. Notice also the father has a Jupiter, Mars, Pluto. The stepson has a spreading Jupiter, Mars, Pluto. The third planet in general is changing. The point is this. Let's settle down here. And what are we concluding? We're concluding that if a parent has two planets in aspect in the saptamsa chart, and especially if a third planet is involved, or it's Sun and Moon, or if it's very almost exact, the same pairs get repeated by children, grandchildren, adopted children, and even stepchildren when there's a connection. And there is a connection between the father and step-grandson. They live in the same town, about, fairly close to each other. So they see each other periodically. Okay. But you would never expect that there's an astrological connection. What we're seeing here is that there is an intricate tapestry of vibrations that draws us into situations that's much more complex and intricate than we could ever imagine. It reminds me of the saying, I've heard it with different nationalities, if you marry a Polish girl, you marry her whole family. Heard it with Polish or whatever. We're seeing this network of connections. Okay. This network that develops. Okay. Now, now this is really amazing. Not only do the father, the daughter, the step-grandson all have Sun, Moon, all have Mars, Pluto. They're in the same degrees. So it's a synastry. they're overlaying each other as well. So let's look at it. On the left, 3 to 4 degrees of the same signs. The father's sun trine moon in 2 degrees of Aries and Leo. Let's go to the daughter. She has Mercury at 2 degrees Aquarius. Daughter's Mercury's opposition the father's sun, and sextile the father's moon. So her Mercury combines right exactly into his sun moon. And her Mars at 4 Gemini is at the midpoint area, but weakly. It's at 4.5. So it's, very, very weak. So the Mars, not that much, but Mercury definitely is there. Fascinating. What's going on here? So, yeah, the Mars, I'm just looking at this again. Mars, is very, very weakly aspecting. But the main thing is that there is this resonance plus some synastry. I was getting synastry and symmetry mixed up in my mind. Some synastry as well. Now, the step-grandson, his Sun, Mars, Jupiter, all at his Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto at 2 and 4 degrees is aspecting closely, by the way, the daughter's Mars at 4 and also involved with this. So we're getting things like the step-grandson's Pluto at 4 Aquarius, opposition, the Sun, very, strong, 2 degrees for an opposition is strong. So it's overlaying as well. We're seeing the synastry between the step-grandson and the father. By the way, I didn't mention it, but assuming that the step-grandson's birth time is very accurate, and it is a recorded time, in a hospital where they tend to record these things carefully, his ascendant is also at 4 degrees. So, even making this stronger. In fact, his ascendant is opposition, the daughter's Pluto. So all 3 charts have overlays here. Daughter's Saturn is at 3 degrees as well, that Mercury-Saturn opposition, tying up with these whole configurations. In fact, at 3 degrees Leo, let's take the Leo-Aquarius axis. We have the father's sun at around 3 degrees Leo, the father's sun, the daughter's Saturn, the daughter's Mercury, and the step-grandson's Pluto. They all have a planet on that axis. You'll probably see other things, that are extremely consistent. Bottom line, it's so strong. It's, even though this is just one case, to think this could all be a coincidence. So when the BPHS says that the saptamsa chart is your children and grandchildren, it seems to be that there's a vibrational connection, especially likely in 7 vibration. It's probably not the only vibration, but there's a tendency for 7 vibration to have connections with children and grandchildren. There's a reason why this makes sense, which I'll talk about later. Well, here I have it. Here's a diagram of all the planets at 2, 3, and 4 degrees of different signs, and it creates, they're all sextile each other. It's making a Star of David all the way around. So at 3 to 4 degrees of, let's see, this is all 2 to 4 degrees, and each one of them has something at 4 degrees. If we include, well, no, we don't even have to include his ascendant. There is something at 2 to 4 degrees of every sign. I'm just noticing the step-grandson's ascendant at 4 Aries puts 3 to 4 Aries at every single point. Every single point, which means they're all within orb. The step-grandson's ascendant, his Mars, the daughter's Mars. Look at that Mars on Mars. Oh my God. That's interesting. At 3 to 4 degrees, the daughter's Saturn, step-grandson's Jupiter, daughter's Pluto, step-grandson's Sun, etc. And yeah. And if we go back to 2 degrees, then that's where the father's Sun trine Moon, that very strong aspect in the father's chart, is the points that are getting lit up to make this Star of David. Fascinating. How sometimes we do our research in a similar way to what we always do in astrology, just looking at cases, but looking at it very thoroughly and carefully. It does look like the BPHS might be referring to these strong connections when it says that the saptamsa is the children, grandchildren. Which if that's what the BPH is referring to, and we don't know, this helps us create a bridge between what is said in harmonic astrology, vibrational astrology, and in Vedic astrology, because we're talking specifically about the connection between them. Okay, and I'll talk later about how that can make sense according to vibrational astrology. A little note, by the way, about true node and mean node. Here we have a tri-wheel, but I've added Rahu and Ketu. And in vibrational astrology, we use the true nodes. And I have videos about what the true node is, what the mean node is, and why the mean node really doesn't make any sense. I mean, astronomically, it's bizarre. It would be very strange that it would have any meaning at all. And videos on the fact that the true node really is an accurate calculation of a true node. There was some discussion among astronomers about that. But anyway, when you put the true nodes in there, you see interesting connections. Look at this. The father and the daughter, their nodes line up in the saptamsa chart. Nodes for some modern astrologers are connected with past lives. I don't know about past lives, but what I do know about is that the nodes are connecting points. They're like gears, and that connect. They bring together, and there's a lot of force coming through them, and that the parent, the father, daughter, right on the nodes, her south node on his north node, and vice versa. You do have to use true nodes, because the mean node could be, a degree or two or more different from the true node. And when you go into the saptamsa chart, it's multiplied by 7. It can be very different. Strong connections between true Rahu and true Ketu with each other and the sun and moon appear to be common between parents and children. So this is another thing we're going to be looking at and to confirm in future research, is the sun and moon particularly important, and Rahu and Ketu particularly important. Okay. All right, now, that's fascinating. Why the heck would this be happening? And here's my idea about this. Let's take the case of a biological child. And let's imagine that the child is alive in some sense before the child's born. This is obvious. I mean, the child's in the womb. The body is there. The mind is there. When the baby is born, it's very often able to look around and start registering things to some extent. So what is it that's drawing the child to be born, and the child is very closely attached to the mother, very often to the father as well, in a typical traditional family. And what is the magnetism? What is the astrological vibrational matrix in which this is embedded? So what it is the child is drawn, or I'm going to read from this bottom paragraph. The child is drawn or magnetized into an environment of people based on the thoughts, feelings, and energy dynamics of the parents. A kind of thought field, emotional field, a feeling field. Right? We all have our thoughts and our feelings, our moods, our environment, everything about the color and texture of our lives, the music, the food, the hobbies, the sports, the academic interests, whatever it is we're engaged in, all of that energy. And the child is going to connect into this. And what they're especially likely to connect into, very likely, I have doubts that this is true in all cases, but probably a majority of cases, as we're seeing here, and future research will tell us how often, it's going to be this connection into 7 vibration. Because the 7 vibration is going to be the inner dimensions of the souls, the inner connectedness between people. So the child, before the child is born, is obviously not interacting with the parents on the specific details of daily life. That's going to happen, and the parents are going to be, telling children, wash the dishes, do this, did you do your homework, and all the details of daily life will be happening. But at this point, it's you might say amorphous. We don't have this clear daily activity going on with the unborn baby, or in the case of adoption, the people before they've met, or maybe they've vaguely met but not interacting closely, it's a kind of inner connectedness. It brings us to what is going on beneath the surface of things. In our heart of hearts, when we slow down and we think about what's really important, what we want to give time to, what we want to dedicate ourselves to, when we remove the hustle and bustle and noise and chatter of life, what is steady, slow, and deep within us and meaningful? 7 vibration has a lot to do with what's meaningful, what we feel, and what we can commit ourselves to in the long run. Because the 7 is the slow, deep awareness. And it gives us the ability for discipline, for focus, and for depth. And so that's the vibration of the connectedness that's going on. And why that is the connection of the parents and with the children is based on the kind of thoughts we have when we're in a meditative place. We're in meditation, or taking a walk, or quietly reading at night. In that deep, thoughtful, feeling place is where the connection is made to the soul. And sometimes parents have premonitions or awarenesses of the coming child. You don't have to be some great metaphysical psychic. A lot of people experience this. And very often it happens when you're not particularly doing anything. You're just, taking the dog for a walk in the evening, or, sitting outside resting, Maybe it's a nice day and you're just, you were working or something and just going to relax, have a, glass of cold tea or something. And this feeling comes over you of a sense. It's the 7 vibration connection. And I think this is why the saptamsa chart is the children and grandchildren, in the sense that it's the way of communicating and connecting and resonating between the child, the grandchild, and the parent. And in the case where the children are not physical children, they're adopted or indirectly come into contact, through second marriages and third marriages, and they might not even know each other, might not even see each other. There's still these deep thought and feeling connections that make a sense of comfort and connectedness. Because when person A and B connect, they're also connecting to all of the relationships in that person that stabilize. So in a sense, those old sayings about marrying the entire family are true. We're brought into that matrix, that tapestry in which the other person dwells. And amazingly, we connect into that tapestry. It's amazing. I mean, these are things that some people may be aware of or have had inspired thoughts about, but to see it, in black and white, so to speak, like tangibly, like right there, astrologically, it's amazing. And especially amazing because it's like the Freudian idea of the great unconscious, but not just an unconscious of repressed emotions and, the id or something, but an unconscious also of this huge tapestry of interconnected woven threads that really are a part of us, even when we're completely not conscious of it. And I think even a highly conscious person, highly sensitive person, is not going to perceive all of these threads. So anyway, this is what we're beginning to see. And the only reason we're able to see it is from hints from the Vedic astrology. This is why we keep exploring, keep our eyes open, keep looking, keep trying to resolve the cognitive dissonance, which is abundant in astrology. How can it be the Vedic astrologers are saying the saptamsa chart is your children and grandchildren when we know full well how the saptamsa chart works and that it's related to all kinds of things that have nothing to do with that? If we keep looking, keep probing, keep exploring, at some point it starts to all fit together. So this is exciting. Okay, so on this slide, let me read this quickly. I've already said this. The pre-birth connection between parent and child is something we sense at quiet times. A parent sometimes gets an inspiration for a name for the child upon waking up, or when taking a quiet walk, when quietly doing chores at home, or other quiet times. It is in times of stillness when there is clarity that the connection is made. There's something solemn, deep, and thoughtful in the inner, silent, unconscious devotion of the parent to the child. This is the relationship of parent to child is deep and sensitive. The bond is deeper than our conscious desires and aspirations. Okay. All right. So we've already explained all this. The saptamsa chart is often highlighted when you compare the charts of children and grandchildren and when you look at the specific degrees. Okay. So this is more about the meaning of 7 vibration, the silence, the capacity to feel solemn and reverent comes in that quiet, in that depth, to leave a party, escape the commotion of life, the commotion of the marketplace, to withdraw into contemplation. This is the 7 vibration quality. And it's the quality that's making the connection between the parents and the children and the grandchildren. And this is very important because it's going to lead into our next video. The saptamsa chart gives birth to focus and discipline, because we cannot play the piano, we cannot hold a hatha yoga position, we cannot hit a golf ball if our minds cannot withdraw from the commotion and noise of life and get it into a quiet, a stillness. So all of these things are born out of the saptamsa chart. Okay. This is an interesting point, starting with the second line of this slide. Our children and grandchildren reflect back to us our thoughts and feelings that are born from the depth of our souls. They do not reflect every aspect of our souls. That's obvious. I mean, anybody who has children know that they can be very, very, very different from you. And you may wonder what the connection is. Well, the connection is there. Well, you don't really wonder. I mean, obviously we're very strongly bonded, but what is the specific way in which that bonding happens? This helps explain why the children can be so different and why simultaneously there is this deep understanding, not just from the behavior and the experiences and the sharing of those experiences. There's also something in this celestial chemistry that sets the foundation for all of this to happen. So the children do not reflect every aspect of our souls, but rather only particular qualities that were brought together at a particular time and that are woven by everyone else in the fabric of our lives and in the aspirations of our children. So we contribute these threads in the tapestry that connect in this way. I hope you can feel this. It all makes so much sense in retrospect, what's going on and how this clarifies things that we know go on in life and helps shed a light on exactly what these dynamics are. Okay, so this is just repeating again what the things that the saptamsa chart is involved with. You can pause this and read this if you want, but let me read this last paragraph. I had an astrology teacher, a Vedic astrology teacher, way back in the early 70s, and my astrology teacher taught me that the saptamsa chart is your guru. So he did not teach that the saptamsa chart is your children and grandchildren. Different Vedic astrologers have different ideas. He said it's your guru. Other people say it's related to 7th house. It's your relationships. Well, your guru, your respected teacher, there is truth to this as well. What is the connection with the guru, with the deep, respected, honored teacher? Not just someone teaching you the mechanics of something. That depth, that soul connection, that place of wisdom, and where we become quiet and deep is involved there as well. And our capacity for devotion, dedication, honor, respect, all those things are born out of the saptamsa chart. Now, just one final thing. This is a long video. We're already going to go almost an hour on this video. If you look at people who have strong saptamsa charts, we went through the database to find people who have the most planets connected in the saptamsa chart. And look at this lady, Teresa Schwartz, born in 1851 in the Netherlands. Oh my gosh. She has Uranus, Venus, Mercury, Mars, and Moon all within 6 degrees. Whoa. 5 planets within 6 degrees. Extremely strong. What qualities is she going to have? Is she going to be spiritual, as some people say? What's going on with the saptamsa chart? What I propose, and what we, not just myself, but what we understand in vibrational astrology, is that there will always be this depth, this ability to be quiet, this ability to go deeply, quietly into things, often a sense of mastery involved in the person's ability to just be still and go with it. And so we don't know exactly in what area we'll be in. There are all these other vibrations. We need to look at the whole chart. But that quality will be conspicuous when the 7 vibration is conspicuous. In Teresa Schwartz's case, her high level of mastery was in high demand by royalty, by nobility. She worked steadily for over 40 years, produced over 1,000 paintings. So she was a painter. Over 1,000 paintings. Her technique, her expertise was extraordinary. Her work was in high demand by wealthy people, nobility and royalty and other wealthy people. And she became very wealthy from her high productivity, and she began charging very high prices. So it's the master. You want the master painter? A lot of people would say, go to Teresa Schwartz. She's going to be expensive, but she's the master. So that's what you get. Okay, my friends, this was a longer video than I thought. It had a lot to say there. Very exciting to see another dimension, another, we could say expression is a better term, of the saptamsa chart. In the next video, that'll be our 5th video in the series, we're going to look at the saptamsa chart in relationship to athletic ability. So, spirituality, children, grandchildren, gurus, athletic ability. How can the saptamsa chart be related to all these things? It's all about the quiet, the depth, the discipline. And when I talk about athletic ability in the next video in this series, we're talking about the best of the best of the best. We're not talking about somebody who just has a natural knack, a natural ability, has the coordination. We're talking about, in addition to that, people who train, practice the same thing over and over and over and over again. And most people get tired of this. They say, okay, I've been practicing my tennis swing for an hour. I'm done. I want to do something else. I've had enough of this. And then there's the person who says, let me try again. And they get into this idea, I want to master this. It's not just persistence for the sake of persistence. It gets turned on when the door is open to mastery, when the person is feeling that, wow, I am getting this backhand. I'm getting that topspin. It's like a kind of magic, like a perfection, a mastery, an excellence. Through dedication, through repetition, and through attention and focus. So the same thing that opens up doors to a metaphysical awareness, symbolic thinking, slowing down, getting deep, manifests in all these ways and in particular kinds of relationships. So in the next video, we're going to see how the saptamsa chart is incredibly strong with the greatest athletes. And this is something that has not been noticed, as far as I know, in any other tradition of astrology. And it sounds strange when you're used to thinking about other ways that the saptamsa chart develops. So we're really, in this information age and with the use of vibrational astrology, we're really getting a real complete understanding and able to integrate in different ideas, not because we want to or need to integrate them. It's just that they work, that people have gotten a little bit of the truth here and there, and we're seeing how it all fits together. Possible now in the information age with computer power and internet, etc., was not possible at any previous time in history. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.